Hey everyone, so my name is Zach White if you don't know me, and this is the first video on my new review channel called Against Type Reviews. Basically, I just wanted to do normal movie reviews with the addition of reviewing the spiritual content, because I think that whether they are Christian-made movies or not, I think that the gospel reveals itself in a lot of ways, or at least I just like to find the parallels between, you know, certain themes in movies and biblical themes. So, what a better way to start off than make a video that has nothing to do with any of that. Also, I'm sorry, this whole backdrop is not the greatest with the ceiling fan and everything. So, what gave me the idea to make this video is basically, we were watching The Polar Express, and I think that was like the first Christmas movie that we watched this year. And if you haven't seen it, the kid gets picked up on the train, he's being taken to the North Pole basically, and toward the end of the movie they get to the North Pole, and ever since I was young I just hated that North Pole. Like, out of all the North Poles in every movie that I had seen, it was just the worst. I'll get into why it's the worst in a minute. But basically, once I saw that, I just started thinking all about all the other North Poles in the movies, and, you know, like in the Santa Claus and in Elf and all this stuff. And I just thought, you know, it'd be kind of fun to rank these from the best one to the worst one, basically based on which one I would want to visit. And that should be the determining factor for everyone else watching this. And yeah, I took this way too seriously. I have notes. I've come up with specific criteria that I'm going to judge each one of these off of. The standards of the North Pole. So, first off, I am judging each one based on their version of Christmas Town, as it's usually called. So, like the little town in the North Pole where Santa and the Elves live, and I am basing that off of architecture and its surrounding location. I'm going to be judging the Elves based on their cuteness and their niceness. I'm going to be judging Santa based on his intimidation factor, which he should have none, and his jolliness, which he should have. And I'm going to be judging it based on its perks, which is, if I'm visiting it, what am I getting out of it? Again, this is a terrible introduction to what I'm going to be doing for the rest of this channel, but I don't care. It seemed fun and I'm going to do it. Number 5, what I consider is the worst North Pole in any of the movies, is the Polar Express North Pole. So, judging its Christmas Town. First off, I'll start with a positive note. Its architecture, I give a +1. Because as big and empty as it is a very well made and kind of nice looking town in general. So, you know, the buildings are really nice, as like cobblestone streets and whatever. It's honestly probably one of the most professional looking North Poles, like out of all of them, the most city-like. So I'll give them a point in their favor for that one. -1 on coziness. I don't think I mentioned coziness before, but yes, that is one of the criteria. -1 on coziness because it is so empty feeling. You get in the place, like I said, it's like a big giant city, but once you actually get to looking around the place, there is nobody in it. It is like a big ghost town and feels very empty, very quiet, and very creepy. -1 for the location. Does not make an impression. I just honestly can't even really remember what the surrounding Arctic terrain looked like, so I'm just gonna dock it a point for that. The Elves. This is where it really gets bad. If I can put a picture up, I will, because these things are really terrifying. I'm giving it a -5 for the cuteness of the Elves. They are extremely creepy. And a -1 for their niceness, because they are real. Not only are they creepy, they're mean. Like, they're really mean. Like, these are supposed to be Santa's helpers, but they seem like they've been on the job way too long. And plus their voices sound so distorted, and they're just really weird elves, and they tie a big bow on what is wrong with this North Pole. Alright, point number 3, Santa. -1 approachability. He is very intimidating. He's a big, giant Santa with a deep Darth Vader voice, and I just would not want to sit on the Santa's lap. And -1 jolliness. He doesn't really seem very happy. He seems very composed and very serious, and not very jolly. And finally, the perks. I will give it a +1 for the trains because the train is kind of awesome, and that's honestly the best part of the movie. But a -1 for weird religious ceremonies. Yep. It seems like every year when Santa first exits his home, all of the elves gather around in the square and they sing a very creepy and monotone version of Santa Claus is Coming to Town to beckon his arrival. And it kind of gives me the creeps every time. Now this one, honestly, I thought was going to be a lot higher up on the list, but after thinking about it and after kind of, creating my criteria, it really didn't score very well. Oh yeah, that reminds me, each of these is going to get a score at the very end. So the Polar Express gets a -9. Back to Rudolph. So, I keep letting my head dip down too low, sorry. Anyway, for Rudolph, for Christmas Town, I give him a -1 for the architecture because there's really no architecture except for Santa Claus's big giant castle, if you remember that, and I'm not really a fan of the Santa castle. I kind of like to think of Santa Claus as living in a log cabin type situation or something like that. I don't like the idea of the big Santa castle. I gave it a +1 for its location for some reason. I'm not really sure why. They're kind of just out in the middle of the snow. Maybe it was because the elves, they don't fare a whole lot better than the Polar Express elves, to be honest, except they're a little cuter, I guess. But anyway, I give them a -1 for their cuteness because they kind of all look the same, and honestly, they're not that cute. I'm sorry, they're kind of featureless. And a -1 for niceness because if you remember, they all shunned Hermie when he said he wanted to be a dentist. None of them supported him, especially not the lead elf. He kind of yelled at him. Hermie didn't really benefit from that movie very much in the end. I mean, Rudolph kind of got all the glory from it all, and then Hermie was just kind of like, hey, I accept myself too. Santa. At the time that I made the list, I gave him a +1 approachability and a +1 jolliness. But after watching it again, I'm going to give him a 0 approachability because honestly, this Santa ain't that great. The part in the movie where they put the false nose on Rudolph and he goes to play the reindeer games and they're doing like flying practice and whatever, and then the nose gets knocked off and everybody kind of freaks out because he has the red nose, and Santa's standing there watching and he looks at Donner and says, "You should be ashamed of yourself." And it's not until later when he figures out that Rudolph can be useful to him that he seems to accept him. So anyway, yeah, I'm going to change this and I'll give him a 0 on approachability because I'll just be neutral on that. He's not really, I wouldn't really want to hang out with him. And I'll give him I'll just give him a 0 on jolliness too, because I mean he's kind of human. I mean he's flawed. Like he says some mean things at first, and then later on he kind of accepts Rudolph. So it's a human character, I guess. And perks. One of the perks is Leon the Snowman. He's the guy who narrates the whole movie. Now they say his name is Sam at the beginning, but we know his real name. It's Leon, and he'll make an appearance later. I'll tell you why. -1 for bigotry. So Rudolph scores -2. Next movie, Fred Claus. Fred Claus is a little weird because I feel like it's not really a classic to a lot of people, but I'm sure some people watch it. I mean, we've watched it a few times. I kind of just threw Fred Claus in here to fill up the list, but as it turns out, the North Pole and Fred Claus actually scores pretty well. +1 for architecture, +1 for coziness, because it's kind of a cute little cottage town. It's a pretty cozy looking North Pole. And +1 for location. They show an aerial view of the whole North Pole, and it actually looks pretty cool. Elves, I'm giving them a 0 for cuteness, not because they're not because they're ugly, but they're just kind of normal people. they're just people that were either actual little people or they just sized them. They like did camera tricks to make them look smaller. So there's not really much to them other than that. And a +1 for niceness because they're all pretty decent. They're nice elves for a change. Santa, and this is probably weirdly one of my favorite Santas. Paul Giamatti is Santa. He's not really like a traditional Santa, but I really do like the way he plays him. +1 for approachability. This is probably the Santa I would want to meet the most out of all of them, because he's kind of just like a cool guy. Like, he's very mild mannered, and he's not like the big, loud, like jolly Santa necessarily. I am giving him a +1 for jolliness, but he's not like jolly in the regular sense, I guess you'd say he's jolly. But he's a really cool, funny Santa. Except for when he fights Fred. He kind of plays a little dirty. And the perks, I give it a +1 for Ludacris playing the elf DJ. And I give it a -1 for Kevin Spacey. Yeah, he's in this. Fred Claus gets a rating of 6. All right, North Pole number 2 is from Elf. I honestly thought this one, I mean, it is number 2, so it's pretty high up, but I honestly thought it was going to get a higher rating than I ended up giving it. I'm going to give it a -1 for architecture, a -1 for coziness, and a -1 for location, because if you remember, I think the only time we really see outside of the buildings in that North Pole is when Buddy is like running between them. The whole place is just kind of like, they're just out in this big dark tundra, and it doesn't really look very appealing. So I'm gonna have to give it a -3 overall for It's Christmas Town. Sorry. I really didn't want to do this to Elf, but it turns out that It's North Pole really isn't as appealing as I remembered. The Elves, they also get a 0 on cuteness because they also are just normal people. I'm going to give the Elves a +5 on niceness, though, because they all were pretty supportive of Buddy. I mean, he was there all those years, and it took him until he was like 30 years old for any of them to actually tell him he was a human, and it was by accident. As for Santa, I'll give him a +1 approachability, because he seems fine. But as for jolliness, he doesn't really show that much. And the perks are really what make the North Pole and Elf rank so high. So, perk 1, Leon the Snowman. I told you he was going to come back. He's pretty much the same snowman from Rudolph, so I choose to believe that he is the exact same snowman from Rudolph. And either he changed his name from Sam to Leon, or he was just lying one of those times. But Buddy does call him Leon at one point. +1 for Buddy. I don't think I have to explain myself on that. +1 for Bob Newhart, and of course +1 for Mr. Narwhal. Elf gets a rating of 7. Alright, and finally, the number 1 movie North Pole is the North Pole from the Santa Claus movies. And honestly, when I made this, I figured Elf was going to be at the top, but after going through it, the Santa Claus North Pole is pretty awesome. As for Christmas Town, it gets a +1 architecture, a +1 coziness, -1 location, because if you remember, the North Pole from the Santa Claus movies is underground, like it's in this big giant dome kind of thing, and that always kind of messed with I kind of have a slight case of claustrophobia, and that always kind of messed with me. As for the Elves, I mean, they're all just adorable little kids, so +5 for cuteness and +5 for niceness. Like, there's really nothing wrong with any of these elves, except Bernard. He was a little salty. Santa, Tim Allen's Santa, I mean, he's a little cynical at first, but, you know, once he gets into it, he's pretty great. So +1 for approachability and +1 for jolliness. I mean, I'd want to hang out with the Santa. And for the perks, +1 for hot chocolate, +1 for satin monogrammed PJs, if you remember that. But -1 for reindeer potty humor. Not a big fan of that. Anyway, the Santa Claus comes out with a rating of 14. So the Santa Claus is the number 1 North Pole that I would want to visit. Hooray! I know this was kind of a goofy video, especially the one to start off with, but I just kind of wanted to make it. It seemed fun. And it was Christmas time, so I figured why not. Anyway, I promise the rest of the videos on this channel are going to be a little different. They're going to be, like I said at the beginning, more movie reviews. I'm not sure exactly right now what my next video is going to be. Hopefully it'll be a review so I can kind of stay on topic here, but who knows. I'm sorry if I seem a little run down, but it's Christmas and I'm a little tired. Happy, but I'm tired. So here's 3 words I've always kind of wanted to say. Please like, comment, and subscribe. And tell me what you think of this list. Do you agree with my ranking of all the North Poles? Did this offend your nostalgia? And also let me know any movies that you may want me to review in the future, and I will definitely consider them. I'm probably gonna try and continue the M. Night Shyamalan series that I was doing with my written reviews. And if you don't know about those, I was doing written reviews on Facebook and Instagram before I started putting up videos. So go check out those at Against Type on Facebook and Against Type Reviews on Instagram. So yeah, thank you guys so much again for watching. Have a Merry Christmas, and let's remember to keep Jesus at the forefront of it. And I guess I'll see you guys next time. Bye. And number 4 is, number 4 is Now I know I'm getting into some nostalgia territory. Now look, I know this one's gonna offend some people. A lot of this is gonna offend some people, but that's, I just don't care. I'm not here to make friends. It's weird. For the elves, +5 cuteness, because +5 cuteness. I mean, if you remember. As for Santa, he doesn't really stand out that much. I mean, I'll give him a +1 approachability because he seems alright, but yeah. Because I feel like it's not really a classic in a lot of people's home.